20 Minute Tim's flagship podcast, number 315. I'm your host, Jamie, and I'm joined by Melly.
Yes.
And Stephen.
What's happening, folks?
Well, we nearly made it one full calendar year. We nearly made it one day short, Stephen, when we lost to St Mirren 2-0 at the weekend. What happened?
No easing in this week, is there? No,
I think that's what people want to know. They just want to know what happened.
It was dismal, to be honest. It was a really terrible performance. It's not the first time this has happened to Celtic. I feel like the pattern is there where modern Celtic of the last 10 years, maybe even longer than that, are very consistent, very consistently successful, very consistently the winningest team in Scottish football. But when it goes off the rails, it's spectacular. And it wasn't quite a Hearts 4-0, this one. But I feel like as much as we didn't concede that number of goals, the performance was every bit as kind of woeful as that was. There was nothing... It was irredeemable. There was nothing good about it. I've since seen it back and I thought, right, are emotions high when you're watching your team lose like that, when you're watching a quite inept performance? Is it as bad as you make it? In the cold light of day, can you watch it back and see positives from it? No, there weren't any at all. I'm not getting carried away. I don't think that, oh God, we're out of the title race or anything like that, but it was really bad. I sat here a couple of weeks ago after the Rangers game and I said that on this kind of form, Celtic are unstoppable domestically, because I'd watched what they did to Rangers and I thought it was going to take some doing to
Resistance
stop
is futile, I think that's what we said.
That was the exact line, that was the exact title of the podcast and everything. But what I also said that day was that, look, one of these performances will come along at some point. We will turn up to one of these stodgy teams' grounds, we'll create 12, 13 chances and miss all of them, and the result won't come our way, because shit happens in football. But that didn't even happen either. No. Didn't even create any chances to miss them. So a very disappointing day at the races, to be honest with you, for Celtic.
One of the things that you hear a lot about people say about their team is, they just didn't turn up, and that sort of encapsulates that Celtic performance at the weekend for me, Melly. I mean, it wasn't an Ange Postecoglou performance. It was just lifeless, drab, zero energy. It had none of the hallmarks and style and approach and play, none of the stuff that we've seen from Ange's team, even since day one. I can't remember a flatter performance from the minute Ange walked in the door. I mean, we've had some poor results, so we've lost, but it wasn't even like St Mirren were throwing bodies on the line and battling with their lives for that. It was just, Celtic were just beat. They were just beat when they turned up.
Yeah, it was kind of out of character, I felt, for this team, because even we're talking about a year ago since we last lost. We lost the first three away games of the season, and maybe the Livingston one's kind of a wee bit like this, but again, you put that maybe down to the pitch. But this one, it was just didn't feel like Celtic. It felt like something was different. It just felt a bit off, and throughout the game, when St Mirren scored, you felt, right, get in at half time, get the old hairdryer out, all that, make some subs. Nothing really changed either anyway, and it just felt like, look, it's one of those games you always hear Celtic could still be playing and not scoring. That doesn't really happen with Celtic, but I genuinely believe that, because just nothing went right for us, and to be honest, we didn't make anything go right for ourselves either. It was just so poor.
Ange went looking for the hairdryer but found Jota was using it because he came on at half time. So you see the neck of him these days. I know we've got stick for this before, slagging his hair, but I feel like I'm in a good position to do it now that the results aren't coming.
I think the problem is people are slowly coming on board with us on that. People are slowly starting to get, that guy's hair is a bit silly. Was it the changes, Stephen? Because how many changes was there? End up six changes, and we've spoken a lot on this podcast, and Celtic fans all over have spoken a lot about the strength in this team. This might be the strongest Celtic team that we've had in such a long time. You know, options, 2 good players for every position. You bring in 6. One, that's a lot of disruption for the team. But also, does it sort of make you think, well, maybe on paper we've got this really strong team, 2 great players for every position. You can swap players out and not really, the quality doesn't really suffer. But in practicality, a lot of these guys that don't start games are maybe no starting them for a reason.
Yeah, I don't think it's, well, of course that level of change causes disruption. Of course it does. I think that's only natural. But I think the way you would sort of negotiate with a game like that if that's in your head that it's going to cause disruption to make as many changes. I suppose the calculations you're making in your mind as a manager going into it is, are the changes going to be so disruptive that we still can't get a result? And Ange isn't going to go into a game thinking, well, there's no chance we're going to win because we've made so many changes. It's just that the calculations were completely wrong.
Did he have too much faith? Did he have too much faith in the team that he put out then?
The changes were numerous and damaging now in hindsight as well, because I looked at the team, I have to admit I looked at the team and thought, I'm not really sure about that, because as much as we've been talking about the strength of the squad, and that's still valid, you know, we've had a bad day here, we've had a bad result, we've still got good players there, but we don't have like for like replacements for a lot of these things. So if you, for example, look at the midfield that they put out against St Mirren, it's nothing like what the midfield generally is. So if Matt O'Reilly and Rayo Hatate are going to play more often than not, putting in Aaron Moy and David Turnbull are nothing like those players. So that it's different. It's not just that, right, if this guy's an 8 out of 10, this guy's a 7 out of 10, maybe he's a 7.5 out of 10 and it will balance out. They're totally different players, and I'll just say it, much slower, much more ponderous and far less creative than the players that they replaced. If you stack that up against the two wingers being changed, again, neither of them particularly creative. Abada's been brilliant scoring goals recently. Doesn't create an awful lot. I'd actually said that Abada, he does a lot of things without thinking. He puts his head down, he crosses without looking, he dribbles without looking. So, but again, I'm not really blaming that for the result. Maeda, poor form recently. I'm kind of having to stop defending him as much as I have recently, because he's just not been very good recently at all.
I think form comes into it a lot, doesn't it, when you're looking at some of these players, because as you say, they're still good players. But there's just too much change and reliance on players that are out of form. Maeda was a strange one to me, because as you picked up on, he's been out of form. And if you're going to change 6 players, why bring out Hatate, Matt O'Reilly and Jota, who've been brilliant, but leave Maeda, who's been poor?
Well, I'll skip to the end of my point, because I'm very aware that I'm kind of breaking down the entire game, and we've all got a lot to say on the performance. So I'll skip to the end of my point, and it basically is that we have many things that changed in that game, and I think you can afford to carry one or two of the things that happened, and I include, I haven't got to it yet, but the centre halves are an inferior pairing to what we're used to as well. I think you can carry one or two of those things at a time, but not all of them happening in one game. And we found that out very brutally. It has to be said, in brutal fashion, we found that these things have still to be worked on. But I think I doubt we'll see that level of change again this season.
Yeah, I think going into this game, it's just a thing. I kind of try not to put this Celtic team in with Celtic teams of the past, because they're not those teams. But Martin O'Neill's teams had a bad habit of the game before an international break, after a European game. Martin O'Neill was fatigue. He always mentioned that. Lennon done it quite a lot as well. And that sort of gets into players' heads and they drop points. But Ange doesn't do that. But into this game, it just felt like just need to get this game out of the way, and then that's international break. The game was there to be won. Yes, we had a big game against Shakhtar in the midweek, but we hadn't played the previous weekend. So now in hindsight, those changes look silly. And the changes, it's not so much, I don't think any of the players that came in were bad players. No. I just think there was too many changed, and spoke about it towards the end of last season when we were looking at the squad. I wanted another winger, because Jota out that team takes up so much creativity, and Maeda and Abada, while they're good at what they do, they don't create for anybody else. So starting those two guys, I don't like doing that anyway. And then when you bring in Turnbull and Moy, fine, both good players. I've said I think Turnbull's good. I think Moy's been playing well recently. But taking out Jota, Hatate and O'Reilly, that's the creativity. That's all the creativity in the team. The other guys are all good, hard-working endeavour, but they've not got that bit of quality. And it's not just those guys as well, because we played games without them last year as well, but we've also lost Tom Rogic and haven't brought in a sort of like replacement. Not that we need that, but it's just another player we had last season that comes out of that team that isn't creating anything, because while Celtic had the better players in all positions on the pitch, there wasn't any creativity, and it just felt like, I don't know, it was just a slow, ponderous game, and a lot of players in that are like that. There's nobody that can make something out of nothing in there for me.
I think the contrast between the two games is quite interesting. We're going to talk about the Shakhtar game, but if you look at the Shakhtar game in the whole, right, you look at that and you go, there's not much more the manager could have done, because when the chances were created and we missed them, that was a good managerial performance. But when you rewind and look at when you fast forward rather and look at the St Mirren game, I'm looking at that going, I think this might be on the manager. I think this might be on the manager. David Turnbull, another player who's been quite out of form recently. We've already mentioned Maeda, quite out of form recently, and you're looking at that going, and the removal of Matt O'Reilly, and I mean, every game Jota scores or sets one up for someone. Are you telling me he couldn't have managed another 90 minutes?
Yeah. I think, to be fair on the Jota and Haksabanovic thing, it looks like they're going to be the main men going forward, but Jota pulled up a cramp towards the end of the game the other night, and Haksabanovic had to go off at half time. That's fair enough if both of them couldn't start the game, but you're looking at it going, right, could Jota had 60 minutes in him and then we bring players on? Because
they never seem to do that, managers, do they? Anytime someone's tired, they seem to give them like the rest at the beginning of the game more often than not, than bring them on for the second half, for the last 30, rather than play them for the first 60 or whatever.
And the 5 subs rule really plays it into our hands as well, with the quality we've seen in recent games. It's why we can go out and batter teams 9-0 sometimes, is we can go out there and blow teams away, then we can bring players on. But the players that we started with this time just couldn't do that. We just looked slow, ponderous, despite having, since the most possession in the first half since 2012 or something. We barely created a chance of note. Keeper didn't have to make any saves, and that's not Celtic of this season. We can talk about the whole year, but the Celtic of this season domestically have been unbelievable. We'd only conceded 1 goal, and that was from a set piece, and it just felt like it was just a totally different team out there.
I don't think, Stephen, this is a sign of things to come. We need to sort of maintain perspective. We don't think that Ange is now all of a sudden a bad manager, or he's forgotten how to manage. But all the ingredients, Ange talks about the system. I firmly believe in this system. This is the way to win football games. He played his system against Real Madrid. He played his system against Shakhtar. He played his system against Rangers, but he doesn't play his system against St Mirren.
Do you not think he did?
I don't think he did. I think all the things that encapsulate the hard closing down, the power, the pace, the speed at which we play the game, that was all missing. I mean,
I don't know if that's a problem with the system or the players that are in the system. I'd say it is.
I know, but he picked them is the point. I don't think you could look at the Aaron Moy, David Turnbull and Callum McGregor midfield and go, right, well, they're going to be running about mental, winning the ball back, closing people down. I thought he sacrificed part of his style to accommodate players that hadn't played very often.
I don't know. Yeah, I do see where you're going with that, because I think he ultimately has built this squad, so it's not really anyone else's fault if players can have to come into the team and can't replicate what has come before them, because that's what they're there to do. Ultimately, they're part of the squad. They're there. When called upon, we hope that they can do a job, and they just didn't on occasion. I don't want to be making like lasting judgments on any of these players. I think individually, every single name we mention tonight that didn't have a good game, and there are a number of them, pretty much all of them, to be honest. Yeah, pretty much all of them. But if we focus mainly on the handful of guys who came into the team that we weren't expecting necessarily to all play, I don't think any one of them is as brutally exposed in that game if he was one of 3 changes rather than 6. I don't think Turnbull looks bad in that game if he's playing next to O'Reilly, if he's playing next to Hattari, whatever the selection is. I don't think Abada looks as bad if Jota is on the pitch. I don't think Welsh looks as bad if Carter Vickers is on the pitch. Some of these were enforced, right? It's not anyone's fault that Carter Vickers and Starfelt are not available just now, but any one of these guys who didn't have a good game, I don't think it's not quite as glaring if we'd only made 3 or 4 changes. I don't think we wouldn't be sitting here talking about changes if that wasn't the main thing that everyone can identify as being the problem.
Isn't it? It is a lot. Even at the time, you think, well, it's a lot of changes, but we had confidence in the team. But in retrospect, you're like, geez. And the question does remain about, I mean, I know Carter Vickers was a forced change, Melly, but that step down for Carter Vickers to Stephen Welsh seems quite high, even given Stephen Welsh's performance on the day. Yeah,
he was poor on the day, but I kind of see people going, he's no good enough, right? Well, do we get 4 Carter Vickers? Because any club in the world would love that. It's just not going to happen. We can't have like for like replacements. It's unusual to have your 2 centre-halves out, isn't it? Carter Vickers and Starfelt barely missed a game all last season since they started playing together, and we've just had a bit of bad luck here, but we're in with the big boys playing the big games, so it's going to happen. And Stephen Welsh, that's 1 goal I can pin on him and go, you should have been better there. In his career, can you do that with any other goals? I can't think of any off the top of my head, and look, no other player is going to look as good if they're not playing beside Cameron Carter Vickers, because he's the best defender in the league, one of the best in Britain for me currently for Celtic. So,
see, just on that point before you finish, did we remove all the best players in the league from our team? Because basically everyone we removed is, apart from McGregor and Kyogo, they're all the best players in the league, really, aren't they?
Much,
yeah, because Carter Vickers would start every game, Juranovic, O'Reilly and Hatate, so Jota, they're all class players. It's just the fact that we took so many of them out has really cost us. The defence, Juranovic and Carter Vickers weren't involved at all, so you can say, right, that's fine. So if you're looking at maybe taking out your defence, a defence which has barely conceded a chance, never mind a goal, keep your creative players on and get the game won, so it's not that. But look, see, to be honest, I went into the game, I maybe was a bit complacent in it because I looked at the team and thought, look, I'm excited to see all these guys because Celtic have been so good domestically. I thought we'll blow them away. We went up to Ross County recently, made 9 or 10 changes, and we did better than the first team did up there as well. So I think it is just a bad day at the office. I wouldn't be judging too many players on a one-off game, but at the same time, if any of these players that came in, I wouldn't see them being able to complain if they don't get a game in the next few weeks because they had a chance and not one of them took it.
Melly mentioned the complacency thing, Stephen, but when you're looking at the likes of Aaron Moy for the goal, it's difficult to think he wasn't a bit complacent there.
Well, he didn't follow the man at all. It's quite shocking actually watching it back.
It's unforgivable in an Ange team.
It is, and with a guy,
that goes back to kind of what I said about Ange's style. It's just out the window.
Yeah, with a guy of his level of experience as well. I know that he's never going to be any faster. That's never going to come. He's not going to get faster. It's not a case of, see, once he gets up to full speed, he'll be faster. It's not happening. Yeah. He is a slow footballer.
I don't think that was down to speed at all.
That's what
the
I mean.
Problem. Isn't it?
So a guy of his experience is what I mean. Like if he didn't notice that guy going at all until he was already 20 yards away from him, and all of a sudden he just sort of trudges back towards his own box when it's far, far too late. A guy of his level of experience, and look, everybody's been a wee bit kind of, we've been up and down with Aaron Moy. I think the words we used, or one of the words we used when Aaron Moy signed was underwhelmed. I wasn't really that bothered, kind of lukewarm about the signing of Aaron Moy. But let's not make any mistake about this. He played 4 or 5 seasons at the very top level. Whatever you think of them English Premier League, there's no denying it is the top level of football. Depending on your preferences, it is the top level. Right? He's played at the top level for several years. He should be better than that. He should be better. He should be more switched on.
Kind of what I was saying about him a couple of weeks ago, not just that particular moment, but that's why I was kind of underwhelmed about Aaron Moy over the past couple of weeks. And I mentioned, because we know there's a good player in there. We know Ange signed him for a reason. We want to see it.
It's very clear with him as well. His passing's great. I really like his passing. It's lovely with both feet as well, and he just sort of effortlessly picks people out all across the pitch. But yeah, that's all very well and good, but we need to do the basics here, especially, again, it's not his fault. You can't single him out and say, but we're missing our best centre-halves here, so you need to do better. It's not his fault, right? But that's more of a reason for me. If you're missing at least 3 of your first choice back 4, if you want to call it that, that's, to me, a even more reason to look for stability elsewhere, a little bit of continuity, a little bit of consistency. Matt O'Reilly and Rio Hatate have been playing a lot recently, but I just think, I'm not questioning Ange. He knows better than me. This is just the hindsight of a fan we're looking at here.
No, I think you're right to question the manager in this. I think this is one of the only occasions you are right to question the manager.
I certainly am questioning him, but I'm not saying I know better. I'm dealing with this with the benefit of hindsight, of course. But I just think that with what we saw happening there, could have got another 90 minutes, could have another 60 minutes at O'Reilly and Hatate.
Still early in the season.
Yeah, exactly. So a little bit disappointing there.
I think Stephen's right here. I think you can sort of put this in the manager, and I'm going to hold my hands up and say before the game I thought we'd have strolled it because we were playing well. I maybe overlooked St Mirren. I didn't realise they'd been doing so well defensively, but when we're talking about O'Reilly and Hatate have played a lot recently, they have and they haven't. Right, because of this 5 sub rule, Turnbull and Moy have come on pretty much every game, and it's usually those two have went off. So they're doing 60, 70 minutes most games. They played during the week and both were subbed, and they hadn't played the previous weekend. I'm looking at that going, right, come on, it's the last game before the international break. Let's go out and get this one. On Aaron Moy, up until that goal, if that goal, I know it's a massive change in the game, but he's let a guy go once. Does that happen to everybody in a game and they sometimes don't get punished? He get punished for it and it's been made aware of. But Aaron Moy came on against Shakhtar the other night. I thought he was great. Yeah, he was great. I've not had any complaints about him, so I'm not going to judge him or change my judgment on him because one time in a game he let a guy go, he seen he done it and he tried to get back and it wasn't good enough from him. But every single player will do that at some point this season. They'll maybe not get punished for it, but he did, and unfortunately for him, it's on him.
See, the one thing I'd say in rebuttal to the midfield and the kind of midfield dynamic and the subs, the use of subs, I think it's less about the minutes played by O'Reilly and Hatate and more the nature of what they're doing. I think there's a certain element of being told, give me 60, 65 minutes of your absolute best and then you're coming off. David Turnbull and Moyer going on. So I think it's probably the more, I maybe put that the wrong way, it's more the intensity of what they're playing rather
calories
than...
burned. How would you measure that?
Yeah, exactly. So it's maybe the intensity rather than just time served in terms of minutes.
I think you're right there, and I think it's the main reason why we all looked at Aaron Moy and went, I'm not quite getting this here. Yes, he's come in and he's played a bit deeper than maybe we expected at first, but with Rogic leaving, we thought, right, who are we going to get in here? And it was him, and you're like, yeah, that's a completely different player, that's fair enough. But if Rogic, where he was going or staying, you're looking at him going, it doesn't quite fit the way Ange wants to play, maybe long term. And when Matt Moy came in, he's not going to be running about pressing, is he? So to bring him in then, and now we see, like, okay, the thing with O'Reilly and Hatate is they absolutely press. They're pressing monsters. O'Reilly was great at it against Shakhtar, and right, you're taking that out, and we've seen like, it just didn't work, did it?
See, on the changes, I know we all agree that there's been too many changes. However, let me maybe suggest another. I feel that seeing how the game was panning out, I thought maybe it would have been a game for Giakoumakis. A wee bit more route one, a wee bit more rudimentary. He can cause more problems in the box, a bit like Curtis Main was causing for us.
I'm not sure. I think both Celtic strikers feed off service, and while yes, it is a bit easier to clip balls into Giakoumakis, he had a point blank header that he missed. You've got to bury that, and against Shakhtar, he missed one that he had to bury. I can look at him as well as Maeda and go, you're missing clear-cut chances, but we love Giakoumakis, so he's maybe not getting the stick that he is. The whole point about Celtic strikers is sometimes they don't stay in the game a lot, like they don't get involved in the game a lot, they finish off the chances. Celtic didn't create anything. Even when we brought on players, we barely created them. We had the header from Giakoumakis, and what else did Carson have to save? A long range one from Greg Taylor. Absolutely nothing. So I don't think, hindsight, there's a lot of hindsight here, but changing the strikers up, yes, we would have been able to hit them earlier, but the two wide players weren't creating and the two midfielders behind weren't creating. So what difference does it make? And just a thing I forgot to mention on the midfield as well is this is why the whole bringing in a solid defensive midfielder at the start of the season, I was kind of against it, because take Callum McGregor out. Why did Celtic look so slow and ponderous on the ball? Because he's not in the base of midfield for me dictating, and however good he is a bit further forward, he's always there for me, especially in these games, because Callum McGregor's got the desire, he's got the energy to be in that position, but also to make it right up the park. So if the ball drops, he's there. When you take him out, you don't have that energy in between the boxes, and with Moy back there, he's maybe a step or two further back. Callum McGregor in there against these teams that sit in has everything. And Moy being there, I don't think he's needed against bottom six teams in these games. It's like coming on against them when we've got the game won. So I think a huge thing was taking Callum McGregor out the base of midfield as well, because he starts everything off. Melly's
touched a lot on this thing before the international break, and while you're right, they sort of took the eye off the ball. The most frustrating thing for me is the fact that our last fixture was against Rangers and we went and battered them. We made that cushion for ourselves, Stephen, in the very next picture, we just give them the points back.
There's always an extra bit of disappointment due to the timing of that. Now, it's the same thing. See if we'd gone 6 games and then dropped the points, it's effectively
mathematically makes no difference.
Effectively the same thing. However, it's that psychological thing, isn't it? It's getting right back on the horse, and we've been joking about
how the game postponed as well.
They'll probably take more comfort from it than we will disappointment. Do you know what I mean? They'll be like, oh, fantastic, it doesn't count.
Save Gio's job with that result, basically.
Good.
Because the major pressure coming on him, and Celtic have gone and shit the nest, as it were. So I get very, very, very disappointing, and there is that that psychological advantage. Advantage seems strong because we're still top of the league, but they've seen that weakness, and it's up to them to kind of put the pressure on Celtic now. Whereas
apparently Gio was asked about it before they played Dundee United about how he thinks the league's going to go, and he says, well, anything can happen, and he's right. We were sort of saying on this podcast, the next time they'll get the opportunity to maybe make those points up is the new year. We're already looking down the road, and then we go, as Stephen says, Melly, shit the nest.
Yeah, but see, to be fair, you looked at Celtic and thought, wait, where's this going to come from? Because that seemed to come out of absolutely nowhere. And well, we can go, right, okay, how do Rangers replicate that? I don't think St Mirren done anything that any teams can go, oh, we'll need to do that. It was a real off day for Celtic, and not just Celtic. Every player that started and every player that came on, even guys like Haksabanovic was getting involved with stuff with fans and then getting involved with St Mirren. And getting involved with players. It was just a frustrating day for Celtic where nothing came off. I can't remember any passage of play where we're popping it about and thought, this is good. It was just slow, ponderous, nothing comes anything when we get up front. There was nothing that St Mirren, I thought, done that we could go, right, do that, apart from stick two big strikers on two defenders that aren't our first choice. How many times is that going to happen that we get three or back, four out, Jota not playing, and Matt O'Reilly and Hatate not starting? Very few times, and
I suppose that's in the manager's kin, though, to make sure that doesn't happen again. Manscaped product alert. You asked for it and they listened. Our friends at Manscaped just brought the Ultra Smooth package to Europe. Everyone knows by now that the Lawnmower 4.0 is the best electric shaver for your balls. But if you're looking for a closer shave or prefer to go completely bare down there, off-putting, then the Ultra Smooth package is the perfect set. It's time to shave that bush of yours, off-putting again, and get right to the roots by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the code TIMS.
That's right, Jamie. The Ultra Smooth package is a specialised groin shaving kit to help you buff, protect and smooth your most sensitive areas. I'm talking crop shaver razor, crop exfoliator and crop gel. Men, you no longer have to borrow your lady's razor for that precise trim. It's time to get up close and personal with the best tools for the job, the Ultra Smooth package from Manscaped. It's just a ball sack trimmer, Jamie.
Yes, it is, Stephen. You can get 20% off and free shipping with the code TIMS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code TIMS at manscaped.com. Smooth out your fellas with the new Ultra Smooth package, really off-putting, from the fellas at Manscaped. Your balls will thank you. You mentioned Stephen Welsh, Melly. See, when that second goal went in, I looked at him, I thought, he looked as if he dived. He looked as if he'd acknowledged that he'd maybe made a mess or he was getting beaten to the ball, and he just hit the deck.
Felt the contact.
Yeah, hit the deck, hoping the ref would pull it up instead of battling and winning the ball. And that was quite disappointing to see. Yeah,
I'll take Welsh on and go that was poor. You need to be strong enough, but I'll also have a massive go at Moritz Jens, who got absolutely out jumped by Curtis Main. Pathetic from the two of them for that goal. Celtic haven't conceded many goals this season in the league. That's 2 out of 3 have been from set pieces. That was just a long flighted throw in. Jens gets outdone by, comes back out, it sort of breaks out again. Jens gets outdone by Main, and Welsh gets outdone at the back post. And it's just, you need to be stronger than that. There's nothing that a manager or MD can do. You need to have more strength and desire in that if you're going to go and win these games, because that's what you're going to come up against in this league.
The thing is, Stephen, for the last couple of weeks I've sort of been thinking to myself that Starfelt probably shades it over Jens a wee bit. Who do you think's the better of the two? Do you think that's answered any questions for you that game?
I think it's definitely Starfelt. I think without a doubt, I think Starfelt's had these moments, but he's never been quite so dodgy as Jens has appeared. Dodgy is strong, but further to what Melly's just said about the goals we've conceded in the league, conceded 4 domestic goals all season. 4 of them headers, and 3 of them were with Jens being completely out-muscled. Don't concede. That's
quite damning when you lay it out like that.
Stats fans, that's 75% of the goals conceded so far this season. I know that's a very small sample, but there's a pattern emerging in that Jens isn't quite the...
Oh, it is a small sample, but it is all.
A small sample where it's all pointing at all the strings are pointing at the same guy here. But it's like on the blackboard or one of those kind of conspiracy theories. If this was an FBI investigation and Jens is writing this
all the red strings going at Jens.
I just think he's not quite. He's been absolutely fine. I think he's decent on the ball and he's been all right. Got a couple of goals, but I think he's. I think he's not quite the big, dominant, powerful centre half that was probably sold to us. I don't think he's quite what it said on the tin. I think he's all right, but I think Starfelt was definitely the number one defender for, well, beside Carter Vickers, that is, because he's clearly number one. But I think Starfelt has been a big miss. It's maybe one of those things like, kind of careful what you wish for. Everyone's saying Starfelt can be, or not everyone, but people say Starfelt can be improved upon. We need a big dominant centre half. We've kind of got one, and it's gone slightly worse in terms of their physical, the opposite of dominance, whatever that is.
For all Starfelt's faults that are maybe highlighted, it's never his defending for me.
No.
It's never his defending. His percentage aerial duels won and all that is pretty incredible, actually. He's really good at that, and he seems to clear everything. And we have highlighted Jens getting out-jumped, but I hadn't quite, when you put it into that context, when all the domestic goals and 3 out of the 4 he's been really at fault for, or out-jumped or out-muscled, you go, right, well, in Scotland, that's what you're up against, mate.
Well, that's how everyone's going to try and get goals against us, isn't it? That's the number one way. It's
the only way they have so far, isn't it?
It's the number one way we're at, and if Stephen's stats are correct, which we've not to check.
Stephen, by all means, let us know in the comments, and I'm sure you will.
If he's persistently at fault for the number one type of goal that people are going to try and score against us, and they're doing it more often than not, then it's definitely something that's going to need addressed.
Well, further to Moritz Jens, he's been quite popular so far because he seems like quite a big personality. He's a nice guy. Melly, you and asked him a couple of questions at his sort of welcoming press thing, right? And came away quite impressed with him. So we've all quite taken to him, but I think it's important when you're looking back at a result of that not to create, or certainly not to let the big players away with it, basically. Don't create sacred cows in the squad, because Kyogo was rubbish as well. And Jens, he wasn't good, and I'm left thinking that, see if Julian or Christopher Ayer or something like that had put in a performance like that, he'd be absolutely hammered for it. So I'm not saying Jens is a bad player, but I'm just saying, look, we need to be fair on guys like Turnbull and the kind of softer targets in the squad, that Maeda, Abada, guys who
get it all the time.
Yeah, guys who get it all the time, who were culpable for it, but were sober, some of the more popular players.
Yeah, I think because Jens is this big guy, it's maybe just, he'll not get out-muscled yet. All the goals have been his fault pretty much in that game, and I think if it was Stephen Welsh that was in that position, Stephen Welsh is getting more attention about these goals than Moritz Jens is, and I don't think that's fair. Again, it's maybe the homegrown or Scottish player that gets more stick for these kind of games than is Jens, because he's a bit more fancied. And if you're looking at Jens, like Stephen's just had it home there, because
Sorry, I was about to say, it's honeymoon period, isn't it? The perception of Stephen Welsh is that he has to prove himself to be good. So every mistake he makes, you think, he's probably not that good. Whereas when a new guy comes in, the perception is, well, he's already good. There's no proving to be done. That must be a mistake. And it takes a wee while to erode that reputation. He arrives already being good, whereas Stephen Welsh has to prove himself to be good.
Yeah, that's a good point,
and Stephen Welsh, he started the first game, he started the Ross County game, and then he's not been in since. He went off in the Ross County game, I believe. So, look, this guy's been flung in, just go out and perform. And he has to do that. His role is fourth choice centre-half. Moritz Jens has played every game pretty much recently, and you're starting to look at him, because we had Shakhtar scouted recently, and our scout Alex said, look, just be careful in this game. If you had Starfelt fit, I'd play him over Jens, because how slow he looks on the turn. And that's a neutral looking at him as well. So yes, he is this big fancy new centre-half, but serious questions are hanging over him now.
Do you think the kit clash? It's been a while since they've had a kit clash. Celtic wore that kit, which by the way is a belter. The third kit. That's the first time we've worn it, at least domestically, anyway. And it was the same. Was it the same colour socks and shorts?
Shorts were both black.
Aye, and I think the socks may have been
socks
the same.
Were different.
Well, the socks were different, and the tops were they were different but similar. And I had a wee look on the SPFL rule. There's no. You think there would be set rules about what kits you could wear. So, they think there'd be rules like socks must be different, shorts must be, but it's not. The referee just gets told what kit's going to be worn a week before the game, and then he decides whether or not he's happy with it. The only thing that has to be different is the goalkeeper's strip has to be significantly different from the outfield player strips. That's the only kit rules that really exist.
Would it have to happen again that to get another new 3 strips and need to use one from last season like we did last season? We're getting 3 new kits and we had to wear the black one against Hibs, because there was no kit we've got this season that really didn't quite clash. I know clash isn't the right word to use, but
because the other one's mostly black with the black and green.
We never were to wear the hoops up in Paisley Doobie, so looking at it again, going, "You've got one job, man.
Yeah.
Sort out the kits."
But did you know the thing I think it is, and you kind of touched on it when we were before we started recording, right? It's not on the pitch. It's probably fine, but again, it plays into this football spectacle thing. That so. From Sky Sports' point of view, they were more concerned with muting the crowd than they were about making sure that the people at home could actually tell the difference between the two strips. There's obviously no communication between the director of the match or the Sky's people and the referee. The referee just goes, the strips look fine to me. I can tell the difference.
Even the shorts would have made a difference, because there is a grey short with that kit. You know, I've seen it would have been all the one colour, but they were in grey into grey, which it doesn't look quite as good. But there is a grey short available with that kit.
So was that
certain.
Was that? So were we wearing the third? We weren't wearing the away shorts, were we?
No,
the black shorts for
no,
the kit.
It was just black shorts. But I think I'm almost certain there's a grey shorts available with that kit as well, just an alternative one. But I think the camera angle on the pitch under these smaller stadiums as well doesn't help, because we only really get that one, and it's straight down the halfway line. It just kind of swings from side to side. On the other side of the pitch, it really was, you had to wait until a player turned face on to the camera for you to be able to tell what strip he was wearing. It was really quite. I don't imagine it was quite as pronounced on the pitch. I think Melly's right. I don't think they would have been passing to each other. Although I'd love to be able to give them that excuse.
Yes.
The old Man United in the 90s one, remember the grey that blended into the stadium thing?
They
changed at half time. I'd love to be able to give them that, but I don't think it would have been as bad on the pitch. But it didn't make for a particularly great watch, that's for sure.
We have almost reached the end of the week of state-sanctioned grieving, and there was a protest at the game, and honestly, it's one of these things now, Stephen, where I almost don't have an opinion of my own on it, because I'm so genuinely exhausted with every spicy hot take about who's doing what, who's not doing what shops should be open, what shops should be closed, should football, are you allowed to protest, should you not be allowed to protest? And then the Shakhtar sign, right? The display in the Shakhtar game, which happened in Poland, in a foreign country, out with the UK, everybody that you hate, from Piers Morgan to Jeremy Kyle to people that you'd forgotten about, they
Farage,
were all
the goodies.
Nigel Farage, they were all having a spew on Twitter about it, and I thought, this is great, all the right people are annoyed, we're definitely doing the right thing here. And then it comes to St Mirren, and do you know what, it doesn't matter, as you said, Stephen, again off air, it doesn't matter what your persuasion is, whether you're into kings and queens and royalty or all that sort of stuff. That was witty.
Oh, it was funny.
That was very witty.
I've got you there, haven't I? Because you if you were standing there solemnly just about to applaud for the passing of the Queen, well, strange tribute that. You're about to clap your hands and they start singing, if you hate the royal family, clap your hands. You'll just be left looking at your hands saying, clever girl. Clever girl. You got me there. Absolute belter. But I'm truly exhausted with this stuff. I think it's incredibly tedious. But what I said, I think that was just last week. I think I said, look, if your thing that you're forcing on people is so politically and socially contentious, maybe have a think about forcing people to respect it and to recognise it. I would even go as far, now that I've seen all this stuff, I would even go as far to say that forcing minutes, silences or applause or any kind of tribute to things like this is ridiculous in football. I don't think it belongs there at all. See if you want, or if you have an important former player for your team who has died, that's an appropriate use of a minute's silence or applause at your stadium. If it's someone who means something to the club, who are a supporter, whatever it is, right, take each case on its merits. But the minute you start forcing people to do this is when it becomes completely ridiculous. Don't do it. Don't force people to do things if you don't want to see the reaction that it may well provoke. I think it's nonsense. Don't put people into a position where you know they're going to react badly to it. Whatever you think about it, whatever you think. One of the overwhelming replies, because I tweeted about it, I'm not going to talk about it here. You can go and find it on Twitter. But I basically just summed it up by saying, look, several clubs have voiced their opinion on this now. It's not just Celtic. We don't want this. Football fans, we don't want it in the country. Some do. Some definitely do. But we don't want this. Stop forcing us to do this. And I think that's a perfectly fair thing to say. Stop making people respect things that they don't want to respect. Why football? I don't see the correlation at all. Exactly what I said last week.
It's an aged thing, isn't it? It's like at one point, a football stadium deciding to stay silent to respect somebody or something was considered poignant and powerful and impactful and interesting. But the minute you force it upon people, as you're saying, it loses all meaning. You will be quiet. You will clap. Well, hold on. I mean, we need to acknowledge that was St Mirren Stadium, and maybe that's something they wanted to do. Maybe the St Mirren fans got together and went, we want to do this. That's fine, but there's no obligation for the Celtic fans to do it. And another thing that does my head in, right? You see it all the time, and we don't want to get too high horsey, because we personally, we talk about this, right? But we hate it when other podcasts and other people, and not football or Celtic podcasts, but off brand, just get all high horsey and start talking about things that don't really fall within their purview, right? But this has been spoken about a lot. The thing that annoys me is this, well, there is a time to protest, but not now. No, the whole point of a protest is to disrupt and get eyes on things. If you're saying the whole do it but not now, it completely, you could say that about every protest that took place at every time ever. So that, for me, that doesn't hold any water at all. When maximum eyes are on it and you want to make maximum impact, that's when you protest. You don't go, I really don't agree with this thing, but you know what? I'll leave it now because a lot of people are paying attention to it. That argument doesn't make sense either. No,
and I think it kind of plays into why the games were cancelled last week in Scotland, because they thought, Celtic will boo a minute's silence. Well, Celtic were the last game, and I didn't really hear a game in Scotland that the minute silence wasn't interrupted. So maybe it's not a Celtic thing that's not wanting this. Maybe it's a mainly Scottish thing, and mainly a working class thing, that we don't want to be forced to do things we don't want to do. Why respect something we don't respect and we feel doesn't respect us? So don't make us do it.
And you're right, it's like the minute you force people to do it, the minute you say, you must respect this, you will do this, well, we don't want to. And it's not something, as you say, Millie, that's had a particular regard for anyone else. Do you know what I mean? It's just decided upon is that it's state sanctioned, you're all going to be sorry, you're all going to be sad, and you're all going to clap. And you think, the minute you start forcing people to do that, it's going to backfire.
And the thing is, I don't even want to take anything away from anyone else. I'm not taking away the right for you to mourn and respect anything you want. That's a deeply personal thing. If you feel grief over any event, take your pick, but this, it just so happens this is a big one, right? If you feel grief, if you feel sad over that, you do whatever you like. It's a personal thing. As you keep saying, as we've all said, the minute you try and enforce that on everybody else, it becomes a complete farce, because it's too hot a topic. This, she's just a grandmother stuff. Rubbish. Rubbish. It's what all of that represents. It's what all of it represents. See the banner, which I won't repeat in case we get pulled off YouTube as a result, right? There was a contentious banner at the Shakhtar game, which we've already mentioned. That's a direct challenge, a direct insult to the symbol of that institution. It wasn't about any individual person. It was about the whole thing.
It was deeply impersonal.
Yes, completely the opposite of personal.
It was deeply impersonal. And see, if you love Britain and you love the UK and you're all for whatever the UK is, one of the things that we live in is a healthy democracy, right? Yeah. And seeing in effect, you should be very, very pleased that there are people in this country who will protest the royal family when the royal family are the focus of attention. You should be so happy that that's the country that you live in, that this sort of thing's allowed. Yeah. There should be no line for it, because by God, as your tweet alluded to, Steve, or another tweet, but by God, these people fight for free speech. This is their big thing. This is everyone's big thing. But the minute people go against the one thing you don't like, shut it down, you can't have that. And just a final note, that, as you said, Melly, protests up and down the country were disrupted by football fans who made their voices perfectly clear that they don't want to be part of this, and they made their thoughts known on it. And they should be allowed to. And if it upsets people, then you're a snowflake, to coin a term, right? But I thought the perfect bookend to the whole weekend was the Dundee United statement.
Lovely stuff.
It was almost offensive in how perfunctory it was. It was more or less, we told the fans to be a minute's silence before the game and what would be happening about it.
I saw a brilliant tweet about it. I can't remember who it was, so forgive me for not crediting, but they said
credits his own tweets, but he credit anybody else's.
Said that statement was the equivalent of replying to a text with a big thumbs up. Cheers, mate.
So that's enough on that. Shakhtar Donetsk, Melly. How did we not win that game?
Taking chances again. We're looking at the players, Maeda and Giacomakis. We've got to be taking these chances. But as you said, look, Celtic played great. But at the end of the day, we came away with this, right? We want to go into this and feel that we compete. We went into the game, did compete, should have done better, and you're still coming out of it a bit, but compete, but win, please.
Yeah.
And look, it was a good result if you handed it before the game, but that's not how football's played. Nobody's going to go into Ange Postecoglou and say, I'll give you a win each right now. He's like, I'd say anyway, well, there's a game there to be won. I'd rather try and win it, and that's what Celtic went to do. Did everything right. I thought the intensity, the press, the passing was all great. We made Shakhtar look very ordinary, and we should have beat them, but we didn't do that one thing, which was put the ball in the back of the net when we were on top and when we had the chances. In that first half when we were on top, Jens had a great chance, didn't score it, and then they went up the pitch. The second half, I thought the first half we were good, tailed off a bit towards the end. Second half we were better, and we just didn't finish our chances. And you're looking at it, the Maeda ones and Giakoumakis ones, they're gilt-edged chances that nothing the manager or any sort of thing can do. You just quite simply have to score them. There's no other way about it. You can't say, we should have created more chances here and there. They are chances put on a plate for you inside the 18-yard box where you don't have somebody in front of you apart from a goalkeeper. I think looking at it, Giakoumakis is probably worse for me because he's a bit more time. And it's just finish them and we win this game.
Stephen, you and I spoke about this game. We've actually reacted to this game twice already on Patreon. So that's patreon.com/20minutetims, and that's the sort of thing we do. We have in-depth reactions immediately after the match to every single game, and we've got one of those on the Shakhtar game, and we do the Breakfast of Champions podcast, which drops midweek. It's like a mini flagship. We catch all the news and goings on that happens at Celtic throughout the week that we can't catch on the flagship. That's available on patreon.com/20minutetims, and you and I had a right good chin wag following the Shakhtar game. Melly reacted it, and you and I had a right good chin wag after it, and we sort of agreed that should be that's the level we should be competing at. The whole object for me in this European adventure that we're on at the moment is to gauge where do we sit, how good really is this Celtic team. I want us to break out of the SPFL. Well, I was about to say because we're too good for that. What a weekend to say that. But Real Madrid clearly too good, but we had chances. We were competing. The Shakhtar game, we dominated them for the first 20 minutes. Shakhtar got back into the game, which you would expect because they've got some good players. They're a solid team. But, before I thought it would be a draw. I thought it would be a draw, but having seen the 90 minutes play out, I was disappointed.
I think it's okay to have these different emotions about that game, with everything we've already spoken about as well. I think it's okay to, on one hand, acknowledge how well we're doing for effectively a brand new team in the Champions League. I know the club has a history with the Champions League, but none of these players do, right? And the manager certainly doesn't. I think it's okay to acknowledge how far we've come in that short space of time, the year that Ange has been here, and acknowledge as well that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we couldn't have done this. We couldn't have gone and taken the game to a team like Real Madrid and gone away to a difficult place to go, albeit a neutral venue, but still a difficult team to play against, and really go at them and come away disappointed with the result. I think it's okay to do all of that stuff and at the same time say we should have won that game, and that is ultimately a disappointment. The disappointment, again, kind of strengthens all the other stuff I've said on the other hand. To be disappointed with an away draw in the Champions League is a sign of progress, but at the same time, should have won the game. There's no doubt about it. The chances created in that game, I think, were enough to have absolutely gubbed them. And I know that's not how football necessarily works, but it was a bit deflating after the game. So yes, going into the game, an away draw in the Champions League, nothing to be sneezed at, but at the same time, Celtic should have won that. Are you worried about how the group might unfold, having seen that? Because I personally think if we're going to get out of this group, we probably need to pick up some points away from home. And I don't see us doing it in the Bernabeu, really, realistically. And Leipzig will be quite tricky as well. No, I always maintained that it was going to be these 4 games in between that Celtic had to pick up points. And I think I said last week, 4 points from Shakhtar and 4 points from Leipzig would see us through. We've got one. And one, you would say, win your 2 home games, draw the 2 away. And I was going into this game thinking, get a away draw here, that'll be decent. But now I've seen it, I thought, if we don't go through, that'll be the game that we really rue. And there's nothing we can do about that, unfortunately, because I can't ask any more of the performance. No. I can't ask much more of the players. We just had to finish the chances. And look, there were good gilt-edged chances from guys who can score big goals that just didn't do it for us. And it's hard to be harsh on players because look, this is them learning on the job as well. It is a big level, and I can't just go to
an individual player and say, see next time, score that. How do you change? How do you go and change
those
that?
coaching badges going to give you yourself.
But that's the whole thing. Like, I don't know what we can do just to simply solve this, apart from it's always be more clinical. Right, how do you do that? Because those players were in the position, they got shots away, they just didn't finish them, and there's nothing, you can't recreate that in training, they have to learn while they're doing it that, right, I need to be better here. How do I be better?
I think it comes down to confidence for me. I think, especially a player like Jota, I think he's maybe just panicking a wee bit about being on this massive stage. That I thought he was drifting in and out the Real Madrid game, and I know we've discussed this and people says, well, it's Real Madrid, but I meant the stuff that Real Madrid didn't really influence. They weren't like nicking and taking the ball off him and all that. He wasn't getting bullied by the fullbacks. This game as well, I just think, and then there was a couple of examples where he was like holding on to the ball just too long. I think he just needs to. I just want to say to Jota, imagine you're playing Rangers. Because see, when they're playing Rangers and we're scoring against Rangers, we always look so happy, so confident. Yeah. Like, this is great and we're loving every minute of it. But we're getting at these games, we're like, oh, there's a bit of nervousness. We're holding on to the ball too long. And it's the same with Yakimakis. His shot, he's like shooting when he's slightly off balance. Whereas if that's Rangers, he's like, I need bother you, Goldson. You know what I mean? They just need to get that bravado and that confidence.
Does Ange have to do the old Alex Ferguson thing? Come on, lads, at Spurs. So I think just imagine Rangers.
Do you know what he needs to do? He needs to walk into the changing room. He needs to open the door and go out. On you go. Get out. Can't handle it. I've opened the door for you, and see who can he take it.
I think you're right there. It's something I meant to mention. I think the whole thing about this team is they haven't done it at that level yet. And I think once we get that victory, once we get that winning goal, everybody will know what it feels like in the moment, and that's it. Whereas right now, nobody knows what it's like. We've got our first goal in the Champions League group stage and we couldn't quite get another one. I think once we get that winning goal where a team goes out there and does it, they can all, because a lot of players and a lot of psychology about it is, can imagine beating Rangers because they've all went out and done it, whereas in these games they haven't done it. So I think once we get that first win, it'll be fine for these players. I think they'll feel, right, we've arrived, we've played well in these games, but we've not got the result. Once you get a result, I think it changes everything. It changes the whole mindset. I think it's just the one wee psychological bit that's missing.
I don't think Ange, Stephen, would be happy just to be there, happy just to make up the numbers, happy for the plaudits after Real Madrid, happy for the plaudits after Shakhtar Donetsk.
Sorry, can I just jump in here?
Certainly can.
Sorry, Stephen. Somebody told me that they'd spoken to a father of a player, and the players had a day off after Real Madrid, came in to do the analysis, and Ange asked the players what they thought, how they got on. A couple of the players, including Cal McGregor, thought they'd done well, and Ange basically done that. He said, get out. If you think, he said, if you think that's good enough and that's the standards, you can take your boots and go, because that's not what I want. I want to be a Champions League team that wins games, not as happy to compete for 45 minutes. So he's not happy about the Real Madrid result, some of the performance maybe, and maybe he's looking for the standards to climb a bit.
Well, he's taken unfancied teams into big competitions before. He took Australia to the World Cup, of course, and took them to win the Asia Cup. So the World Cup is probably a more accurate comparison here. If Australia are going into a group with Chile and Netherlands and all that, they had a really tough group 1 year. There's absolutely no way he was going into that thinking, right, lads, we're here for a stag do. We made it, we qualified, just go out and have fun. There's not a chance that his attitude would ever have anything other than to win these games. Might not always do it, of course, but I think we can forget we've got to the Champions League. It's all about the money and all that sort of stuff.
And I think the frustration for me would be, and what I don't really want is, I don't want us to have one of these campaigns where we're like, that was good, we played the good football, we went toe to toe with these teams, but ultimately we're bottom of the group. You know what I mean? Ultimately we're sort of undone by these, as you say, like missing the chat, all the things you can do really help.
Yeah, we've had that under Brendan Rodgers. We get 2 draws against Man City and finished bottom of the group, and that was us out in our arse. So you can see why you want to do better, because you want to win these games. That was a winnable game, having seen it now, and you're thinking, right, we can beat Shakhtar at home, but the Leipzig game might be...
to beat Shakhtar at home.
Yeah, and the Leipzig game might be completely different than going into the Shakhtar game. Now, it is must win, whereas if we had won that game, you can go, right, this is Champions League. We might get games where we turn up and we're just not quite at it and we get a draw. We were at it and got a draw there, and it might be costly.
And on that, we shall wrap up. Thanks to everyone who watches. If you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe. Please get involved in the comments below. If you want to hear more from us, patreon.com/20minutetims.
That was a fun one, eh?
That was
a good one, lads.
That was really good. Motherwell next. Celtic, if you win, we'll be able to talk about some wins. Thanks for watching and listening.